What's happening, everybody? Welcome back to HuntBetter. Super glad you're here. We're opening this one up to the public tonight because, man, we're talking about something really important, and that is recovery of animals. I can't imagine how many deer hunters have been relieved to see an experienced tracker show up and help recover an animal. So as hunters, we can all agree that there's something kind of devastating when we lose an animal that we've shot, or maybe we lose the trail to the point of where you don't know what to do, you don't know where to go next, and up until now, your best bet was to know somebody that knows somebody, and then hope that they know somebody with a dog, and then you got to hope that they're available and close by, so they can come out and help you locate your animal. Not the easiest problem to solve in that type of predicament, right? And well, that way of tracking down a tracker is totally in the past now. Tonight, we've got Shane Simpson and Garrett Prawl here to talk about a new app called Tracker that their team has really been working on for quite a while. You guys, this is a huge deal. This isn't some new gadget or new piece of gear, as cool as those can be. This is so much more than that. This is a tool that really could make all the difference between you finding this animal you've worked so hard to hunt down and that you've chosen to put a hole in, or losing it to coyotes and vultures or rot or whatever. And so as woodsmen, as upright outdoorsmen, there's a responsibility that we carry to steward these resources well, right? And that means we work hard all year long for that little moment of magic when we have the ability to put an animal down fast and clean. That's what we hope for. But when that doesn't happen, when things don't go according to plan, our responsibility doesn't stop. If anything, it grows. And so it's our job to make sure we've put as much effort into the recovery of an animal as possible. And sometimes when it still doesn't come together, maybe we get a little bit more sleep at night knowing that we've done all that we could. So all that said, thanks for being here. You can tell I'm passionate about this subject. I'm really excited about this one. If you're new to HuntBetter, we're stoked that you're here. So be sure to hang out for a bit. Check out all the content that we have that will absolutely help you become a better hunter. Also, be sure to participate in the live Q&A. That's what we have it for. We want you guys to jump in, ask your questions, fire away. We will get to you as soon as possible. So, all right. Thanks for being here. This is going to be a good night. Sit tight. We'll be right back with Shane Simpson and Garrett Prawl. Before we jump into everything, I appreciate you guys being here. We still have people coming in. Before we really jump into anything, Shane, I want to know, because I've watched you in Cali, the last several years, what's one of your favorite stories of tracking to date? What, the last maybe 5 years, something like that?
This will be my 7th season, so 6 years of tracking. There's a couple of, favorites or stories or tracking stories that most people would find interesting. There's one I tell a lot, so I won't tell that one. I will tell one that I don't tell very often, but was pretty cool to me. Fella shot a deer, and it was in the field with other deer, and it ran across an alfalfa field and kind of out of sight. And we came in there the next day to track it, and I put Callie on it. She did a big loop and kind of went back around to where the deer, in the area the deer came from, back in the woods, where he said they often bed. And that was where we found the first drop of blood at a wound bed. And then we went farther and crossed a fence and got permission from the neighbors to continue tracking. It was a lake there, and with a lot of houses along the lake. And we found a little bit of blood crossing that fence. And from there, we didn't find any more blood, but Callie took me straight across the road, across a yard, a vacant lot, and to the edge of a lake. And she wanted to get in that lake bad. And we looked around, and we couldn't see the deer anywhere. And I was like, I believe your deer's in the lake. And we searched everywhere else just to rule it out, asking the neighbors down the road, had they seen a deer laying in the yard or somewhere. And we put in another hour or two of searching. And then I was like, we're not going to find that deer. I think it's in the lake. But that was about the end of that. A couple days later, I get a phone call. He ran into a lady at the local bar, or I can't remember where. It was a local, and he was telling about the deer he shot. And she said, wait, there's a fella that lives at the lake. He was just in here the other day, and he said he found a deer washed up on his lake shore. And so he went and contacted the guy, and sure enough, it was the doe he shot. It was like 2 houses down, and we assumed that it wasn't there when we tracked, and it was out in the lake somewhere, and it just floated up, And I looked at the wind patterns, weather patterns for that day we were tracking, and after it, and the wind had shifted and was blowing back that way, so that the deer may have been submerged, or it may have been hidden right on the edge, with a thick cover along the edge of the lake, but the wind pushed it down, and he found it on his lake shore. So that was something that was cool to me, because Callie was right, and you never know, it's like, was it in the lake or not? But it was nice to get that confirmation a couple of days later. That's indeed where it was at.
That's incredible, man. I saw a video, I think it was Instagram, maybe like YouTube or something, just one of those short videos. And this lady dresses up in her, like some like leafy suit, but not a leafy suit that you'd go hunting in. It's like, looks like she made it from like Hobby Lobby or something. It looked really good. She blended in with the bush in her backyard. And she set her 2 dogs out there, and the dogs immediately went to her. Like, if you would have pulled up the video and looked at it, I never would have spotted her unless she was moving. It's just amazing. I mean, that's a silly example, but like it lines up with what you're saying. We don't understand how powerful their noses are and what they can see with their nose. I mean, like when you think about whitetails, when it all clicked for me about their nose, like, oh, they're seeing with their nose, just like we're verifying everything with our eyes. Deer are seeing with their nose. And when you think about a dog, I mean, the Seek One video or the scent control stuff, it's just amazing, man, what they can do. That's incredible. I bet it gave you like a huge confidence boost in Callie, what she was like actually able to do with stuff like that.
Yeah, every time she does something like that, it surprises me, and that's the hardest part, is trusting dog. And over the years now, I have a lot more trust in her. But that's the hardest part as a tracker, a new tracker, is learning to trust the dog. And then when they do stuff like that, then it makes it easier to trust them on the next track.
Was that early on when she did that?
That's been about 3 seasons ago. So about, in her 3rd year of tracking. And that was, again, it took me a long time to finally trust her, even though all the veteran trackers say, man, you just got to trust your dog. But what the problem I had was, on the days I would trust her completely, she'd lead me off 800 yards in the wrong direction. And so I'd bring her back for restart. And then on the restart, she'd take me right to the deer. I'm like, why didn't you do that first time? So little instances like that still give me a little doubt sometimes. I'm like, are you sure you're on the right track? And so you just have to read their body language. I've gotten to the point now, 6 years of tracking with her, that I can pick up cues and kind of figure out whether she's actually tracking something, first of all, or just strolling through the woods. And is she exhibiting signs that indicate we're on the deer that we started tracking? Mm-hmm. So that's become a little easier for me. That's what makes a tracking team great. When one person and one dog spend years together, then they become hard to beat as far as recovering deer or any animal, I guess, you're tracking. The dog becomes better at it, and I become better at reading the dog.
Oh yeah, man! I bet that the evolution of that has been pretty cool. I love watching you, because you can tell you have such a connection with her, obviously. But then like when she's like on it, and you get like the GoPro footage, or whatever it is, and you never let go of the leash. And what's so funny is you just see your arm flying out in front of you as you're going through like briars and sticks. I mean, I just love it. I'm like, get after it, Shane, get after it. But hey, we still have people coming in, so let's do this. For the people still coming in, if you have questions, go ahead and get in the comment box there, the chat box, and ask away. We will get to them as soon as possible. We'll be answering them as we go tonight, so don't feel like you're interrupting or anything like that. This is what this is for. When I heard about this, I immediately reached out to Shane and was like, dude, let's get you on HuntBetter. Let's do a live show on it and talk about this thing, because I want to know more about it too. So tell us about Garrett, you jump in here. Tell us about like where the idea come from. How long ago was it? Like a few years, I think it was. And then take us to this point.
Yeah. So, I mean, the idea kind of was born out of necessity from Shane and others running what, was at the time the Minnesota Tracking Dogs website, where the coordination effort required to handle the, incoming, all the fluctuation of tracks coming in, guys messaging on Facebook, and then this guy texting that guy, and then sending him to the website. And the website was kind of set up to where you could, as a user, and in fact, I, had done it last year once just to try
Yeah.
it. Went through and you're able to put in all the information that would get sent to the tracking network in Minnesota, which included Shane amongst a bunch of others. And then they could connect, but the work on the back end that was required for all those guys was tremendous. And it, was a huge liability in time. And there was still a bunch of issues with, like you go an hour out of your way to follow a tracking request. And then at the time, there's nothing else going on in that area, and go back to drive home. And somebody calls up, "Hey, Shane, you still in this area? We have another request." And it's like, "Well, I just left there. I'm back home now."
Yeah.
So the app was a good way to have everything work a lot more seamlessly and have those requests come in real time, and have trackers, as a group, be able to look at the requests that are popping up in their area and see if they'd be a good fit to go ahead and take that track. So the idea's been around for a long time. Having it come to fruition has been a little bit longer of a process.
Yeah, I'd say, and I'm not the only tracker that's thought of this. At the time, it's like 3 years ago that I kind of thought about it. I was like, man, there's got to be a better way to handle all this large volume of tracks. And it's not so bad in the early part of the season, but as you get into closer to the rut, and then the gun season opens up here, and you got 300,000 gun hunters hitting the woods all at the same time, it becomes unmanageable. And I was like, man, there's got to be a better way. What if we did an app or something? I was just kind of having the idea in my head. And then we created the Minnesota Tracking Dogs website and paid for a little form where hunters could submit it, and kind of testing the theory of an app at that point. But also it was, an app is very expensive. So even if an app was out of the question, that website would at least help us, handle the volume of calls. And even it was a lot of work, because you got people manning, so the request would come in, and it's emailed out to like 6 of the admins for the group. And then we create a post in a private Facebook group where all the trackers in our network can see. And so there's still someone behind the scenes manually entering stuff, a dispatcher, if you will.
Yeah.
And so then I got with Garrett and Ryan and Greg, and I was like, let's make an app. If you guys want to go in with me, this is not something I can do on my own. And so here we are, finally got reality here, and got an app that's going to be, hopefully it's going to help a lot of hunters and trackers this year. Trackers really need it.
Yeah. Oh yeah, for sure. And it's one of those things, I think in 3 years, we're going to look back and go, what in the world would we ever do without this thing? And that's when it's like a game changer. Like, man, this is so good for the hunting community. I mean, I can like I said in the intro, like I can get on my soapbox about this because it's one of those things where it's just another level of responsibility when we have the means to do it. Like why would you not have tracker on your phone? Why would you not have it? Okay, so let's do this. Let's talk about like the overview of it. So if somebody's, what's like the pitch of it? What is it? What all does it do? And then we'll dive into, once more people get here, we'll dive into like the real like detailed stuff of what do you need to be doing and things like that. But like just the overview, what does it do?
So I'll let Garrett explain the hunter side of it, and then I'll discuss the tracker side of it, because there's 2 sides. There's a tracker account and a hunter account.
Yeah, and it's maybe worth saying right away too that as a hunter, like anybody watching this who's a hunter might use it to try and connect with a tracker, you'd be able to go ahead and create an account as a hunter. But if you're a tracker who wants to get an account and use it for that aspect, there's a different pathway. You would set up an account as a tracker, and you would get verified before you can actually use it. So just important to make that distinction.
Yeah, so if you're a hunter out there and you're just like, I'm going to create a tracker account too, you won't get in. Just know that. You'll just waste your time creating one. But and then touch on the data portion. But anyway.
Yeah, so if I'm a hunter who downloads the app and I create a profile, which is pretty straightforward, you can submit a request. And when you go to submit a request, you are asked what are your location, and it'll default to the location you're at right now. But let's say you had gone back home or whatever, you can put the pin exactly on the map of where you need the tracker to show up. And you can put in important information. The app will prompt you, what was your height above the ground? Were you 15 feet? Were you on the ground? What was the deer's angle to the best of your knowledge? Was it quartering away? Was it quartering to broadside? Where did you think you hit the animal? There's a grid that shows where, you can plug in like an A5. I hit the deer in this spot on the grid. And then the trackers will be able to look at that spot on the grid along with your, quartering away or whatever you happen to choose. And they say, okay, now I understand where you at least perceived the arrow to hit the deer and at what angle. And then you'll be asked, was it a pass through? Yes or no? Were you not sure? If you did have a pass through, to ask you to, put where you think the arrow exited. And then there's some additional information on the, I guess, more data side of things that you can input. Like, what broadhead were you choosing? What was your bow setup? And some of those things, if you want to, you can preload. Like I have all my archery setups preloaded in there so that when I go to submit a request, if I need to, I can just click that and it all just auto-populates. And, the last few bits of information that it'll ask you are additional things about the tracking up to that point, right? Did you simply have a shot far back and you're like, oh, I know for sure I'm going to get a tracker, so I'm not going to pursue this deer any further. I'm just going to back out and call the request. Did you happen to already pursue that track on your own a little bit until you hit a dead end and you realize maybe the shot wasn't as good as I thought? I need to use the app. It'll ask you those kind of questions because from a tracking standpoint, if you just slowly backed out and that deer is the only, scent trail that is in the woods along that path, that's a very different situation than if you had 3 of your buddies out there grid searching, then you decided as a last ditch effort, you're going to call a tracker because at that point you've contaminated the scent and it will make it a lot harder for the trackers to do their job. So those questions are in part for you to help collect your thoughts, but also they're very useful for the trackers who are looking at those requests to be able to determine, I think this is, a good chance of recovering this deer. He's right in my area. I want to go ahead and reach out to this guy and accept this, tracking request. And then as the hunter, you'll get notifications when trackers reach out to you. You're going to get a notification on your phone, push notification that says, Shane is looking to accept your track, and you'll be able to connect via phone to talk a little bit more, get any more details that might be relevant that the tracker might have questions about. You accept that track and he'll come show up and track the animal for you.
Yeah, go ahead, Shane, go ahead.
I was going to say this. So this really eliminates the need to call down a list of 40 trackers and get either a voicemail. A lot of times they're out tracking. You're going to text them or leave a voicemail, or they're not currently tracking, and you're just going down a list and you're working out farther and farther. Well, this will submit to all the trackers that are available in the area, and that's all you got to do. And if it's 11 o'clock at night, midnight, you're not going to disturb them. You just hit submit, and then if you want to go to bed and wake up in the morning and see that there's trackers available, it makes it easier for both parties.
Yeah, that was going to be my question is like, what would be, like if I'm playing, devil's advocate of like, no, I'm not going to download that. It's just another app on my phone. Like I'll just call somebody. And like, I've never been in a situation where, a super good friend of mine who's I know is going to be available happens to be the one with the dog that can track. Like that unless you're friends with Shane, that doesn't happen, and to be able to just like, I'm so glad you said that, Shane, like to be able to put it in there and know that it's like cast out this wide net rather than you sending personal messages to everybody, and hopefully they get it. I think that's a huge reason to download this app and have it just on standby. And Garrett, talk a little bit more about plugging your information in. I know that's like one of those kind of like detailed features, but talk to that real quick because that's really cool.
Yeah. So partly, like I mentioned earlier, the trackers will be able to use that information in totality to understand what they're getting themselves into, but also all of the information that you plug in about the setup, about the shot height, shot distance, all that sort of thing, all that data is collected. And even before the app was in existence, that data was collected on forms that were on, say like the Minnesota Tracking Dogs website. And you've probably seen in a few instances on Facebook, probably we'll pull up a couple examples of where Shane and Ryan had sifted through that data as a collection and started to filter through and see if there are any trends that start to arise. And so we're going to be able to do the same type of a thing with the app as well. So the more accurate that information is, if you have, let's say, 10 tracks that you either have gone on yourself or you've gone on with your buddies and what the results have been and what setups guys are using and that sort of thing. Well, now if you expand that out to 5,000 data points and then you can start to filter with a more relevant sample size, then that type of information and filtering can become a lot more useful to you. So
Yeah.
it's not present right now with the launch of the app, but that is definitely something that's in the plans.
And that's why the hunter's going to want to download this app,
Yeah.
for that future release. That they're
Man,
going
that
to
is super cool.
that data.
And so, Shane, would you say, like, if I'm a hunter, I heard about this tracker app, I'm downloading it, I just shot a buck, and I lost blood after 80 yards. It just completely dried up. The best thing for me to do if I have the tracker app is to go, you know what? I'm not sure what's going on. It's late. I'm real far back here, so I'm gonna choose to back out. I'm gonna plug this information into the tracker app, and then you just wait. And that's the beauty of it. Like, you don't have to try to figure out what to do next. You call for reinforcements, and then you wait for them to respond.
Yeah, and I'm not going to say that you should just completely just wait and not call anyone. It may, if I'm in that situation, I'm going to submit a tracking request. I'm going to submit it. But if I know the number of someone local, I will, go ahead and call them and just, I don't want to wait and no one responds to me on the app. Like right now, initially, we're going to have a lot of trackers on it. We have a lot of them waiting for iOS to drop here in September 8th. I believe that's about the date that's going to be available on the App Store. It's available for Android now. And so we've added a lot of trackers for the Android portion. But yeah, I mean, it makes it so much easier just to hit submit and it goes out to us. But, like I said, as a hunter, you're going to look at it and say, well, there's nothing on this app for me to do. I rarely need a tracker, I've never needed a tracker. Why do I want that app? Well, all the data that it's collecting, it's already collecting data. It's stored in our database, and we're just creating a feature now that the developers are writing the code for it. And at some point, hopefully, late October or sometime in November, that feature will be part of an update where the stats that I show on social media every year for my tracking and now the Minnesota Tracking Dogs group, the hundreds of tracks we have together, all you see right now is the data I put out there. You can't change any of that. It's like, what were the angles of the shots? What was the broadhead brand? You just see mechanical fixed broadhead. What was the pass-through rates, or what was the recovery rate? Where on the app, you'll be able to go through and filter and say, show me brand X fixed blade. And you could even narrow it down to, you can get fine details. Like, I want to see a compound bow, draw weight of 70 to 75 pounds, arrow weight of 400 to 450 grains, with this broadhead brand, all those details, and say, spit out the results and how many of those were passives or how many of those were recovered, whatever you want to see. And so you'll be able to play with the results. You'll be able to see the angle. Show me all the quarter and away, quarter and two. What were the recovery rates for that? And I think in our Ryan put together some of the stats where the recovery rates for different shot angles varies greatly. Broadside shot is not necessarily as good as we thought it was. Quarter and weight has a better recovery rate. So the user will get to toy with it how they want and see what they want out of the data, not what I present to them.
Yeah, that's really good.
One note to make there too. Whenever you're looking at data, you always have to look at the limitations of what the data set is. And of course, with this data set, it's looking at the group of people that needed to call a tracker, right? So what you're not seeing in that data set is all the perfect shots, right? It's like the broadside example, when you start to ask the question why, we'll have the data, but we won't necessarily have the answer as to why. Like, maybe broadhead or broadside shots were more, all or nothing. If you had a broadside shot that wasn't an obvious kill, maybe it was because it was in the back straps. And that's something that the app, wouldn't be able to tell you, but the rest of the data that there.
You'll be able to see the coordinates. You'll be able to see, like you could narrow it down. If you want to see all broadside shots in this region, and then you would have like in the vital V. So just show me the ones in.
Wow.
So you'd be able to filter through all that. I don't want to see back strap shots. And like he brought up about the dogs, this data is from Tracking Dogs. There are a lot of tracks we go on that the shots were perfect, and for whatever reason it rained or it just didn't bleed well. The trackers were called. So we'll have some of that, but what we won't have is the data from the deer that was shot and fell within sight, or the blood trail was so obvious that anybody could have tracked it. So we will we will be missing out on that portion. But we have talked about adding a feature where people could manually submit their tracking data. And you shoot deer and you watch it drop 70 yards away, you could fill it in. Now we'll probably keep that separate from the main data, and it'll tell you, you'll filter it the same way, but it'll say this is data submitted and this is data collected, and from trackers. And so
that's really cool.
You may see similarities in the results, or you may see some differences.
Yeah, I think that grid. Actually, I saw a picture of, it might be the one you guys are talking about, but and maybe this is already a thing, and I just don't know. But it'd be cool because I'm sure that you guys, especially Shane, you've come across like somebody saying, "Yeah, hit him," right behind the shoulder, and then you find out it's like, oh, behind the shoulder and the last rib, so like. But having that little grid of like A5, I mean, you could see that becoming like common language in a few years. Like, yeah, I hit him around A5, and it might have been A4. That's really, really cool. Maybe that's existed for a while. I don't know, but I think it's super neat.
We hope that doesn't become common language, the coordinates, because we have some improvements for that.
Oh, good.
So this was a cheap and easy way to implement it. We try to do everything to construct the app well, but do it in the most efficient way to get it launched, and then add improvements as we go. Because you don't want to spend $1 million on the app and then it fails. You build it to where it's functional, and then you add in updates and improvements as you go, and then it makes it more financially smart.
Yeah, for sure. So talk about, actually, you know what? Let's go ahead and jump into this data. Hopefully everybody can see this well. We have a few images here, and honestly, I'll just turn you guys loose and talk about it. I mean, what stands out to you with this one here? High level statistics, all bows and firearms.
Yep. Well, I always like the ones with the bows and crossbows pass-through rates. That's the one that sticks out to me most often when people are talking about shot placement, shot placement, shot placement. That's the key. But what I see is it doesn't matter where you hit the deer. Ideally you want to hit it, good shot placement right there in the vitals. But what the data is showing is if you can get a pass-through, no matter where you hit the deer. Obviously, if you hit it in the muscle above the spine, that matters. But if you hit it anywhere in the thoracic cavity or the abdominal cavity and get a pass-through, the recovery is much greater than a non-pass-through. And so what I stress to people is focus on, make sure you practice to make a good shot, but set up your gear and tune it to where you get pass-throughs. That's not as... I guess it's relevant for firearms also, but you pick a caliber or whatever. I'm not a firearms expert. The only thing I use a gun for is turkeys. So I'm not a person that can speak on that with any expertise at all. But when it comes to archery, compounds and crossbows and traditional archery, pass-throughs really make a difference, it seems.
Yeah. Garrett, what stands out to you about something on this compound bow only data?
Yeah, I guess the interesting thing for me is that when you look at the ever popular debate of fixed versus mechanicals, it's not like when I look at that data, I see a clear winner, right? And again, we're looking at the group of data points where it was poor shots, right? Or else it wouldn't be on this list. And when you look at these numbers, you have a decent probability of recovery with either, and a lot of it, like Shane said, has to do with where you hit it and what you hit. And when I looked at the mechanical data for, if you had pass-throughs and mechanicals, the recovery rate was actually pretty good, but you had a lower chance of getting a pass-through in the first place with the mechanical. So I'm a fairly long draw length and high poundage shooter in general. So I know that generally speaking, I can get a little bit bigger hole, provided that I'm not hitting right in the knuckle. So I look at the data like that and I'm like, well, maybe I can live with a little bit bigger cut. And that's going to help me for those scenarios in which I'm able to get a larger, laceration path all the way through the animal, still shooting for 2 holes. It's like, what balance of properties can I still get a pass through on, but still maximize my cutting?
Yeah, that tagging along on that data point he's talking about. I'm kind of anti-mechanical. Me personally, I won't shoot a mechanical, and that may change. as mechanicals improve, like the one Garrett's shooting, the Sever 1.5 or maybe something else now. But that's a very good, solid, well-built mechanical. And even the ones I've tracked for have had good results. They just, it seems like a lot of those guys were hunting on the ground. And so they didn't have a good blood trail. It was pulled up in the body. But if you look at the data, the fixed blades have a higher odds of pass-through, which helps on recovery. But when you look at the non-pass-throughs, mechanicals, beat the fixed blades in recovery numbers. And so when you do the math on each, it almost looks like it's better to have a mechanical, whether it passes through or not. But at the same time, I'm not totally convinced enough to make that switch, because me personally, I get pass-throughs every time. And I'm not afraid of bone. I bust right through it with my compact. Now my recurve, a lot less, poundage and energy hitting that deer. So the one doe that I did shoot with it, I didn't get a pass through, but she only went 50 yards. I hit the other side of her leg and went all the way through her chest. So you can make an argument for either one, So I'm hoping that this app, by a larger volume of data points coming in, will help answer some of these questions. Which one, and you're looking at the general public now. Some of these guys don't have their bows tuned. Maybe the pass-through rates will be better for the mechanical if these arrows, you see them on the videos all the time on YouTube and social media. Their arrows just flying crooked and everything, and no wonder they're not getting pass-throughs.
Yeah, one time I saw Garrett's arrow doing that, and I sent him a message on YouTube. I was like, "Hey, man, make sure you get."
I've never seen his arrows fly anything.
Me either. That story is the complete opposite way around, and it's on me. I think, when it comes down to the mechanical and fixed, I probably land a lot where you guys are. But I think no matter what, it seems to have like two different camps, which is unfortunate in the hunting world, but it is what it is for whatever reason. But I think I feel most comfortable and at peace with whatever you're shooting. Tune your bow, tune your arrow, but have really, really sharp broadheads, whatever you're using, because, and like, at least in my simple mind, I think about, okay, if I shoot an animal with a fixed blade or a mechanical, if it's razor sharp and I've done my homework, if that thing does get stuck inside and it's running around and it's moving, it's still inflicting damage and hopefully going to put that animal down a lot faster. Is that a right way to be thinking about it, at least from the sense of, if I shoot fixed blade or if I shoot mechanical, have the sharpest broadhead you can?
Yeah, definitely sharpness helps, because we've seen instances where dull blades will push organs out of the way, and so we want to cut through the organs and not like just push them out of the way. One of the trackers, I just saw a story he was talking about recently where a hunter shot at a deer with a very dull broadhead, and they cut open the deer, and from the entry and exit wounds, it looked like it would have went through at least both lungs, but one of the lungs didn't have any damage on it, and he couldn't figure out how it got around it. And I'm not going to speculate, but it probably didn't help that blade was dull. And I've seen shows, I remember a show years ago where this was like human related, like Rescue 911 or something like that.
Yeah.
Where a guy fell on a piece of rebar he had holding up a tomato. It was a tomato stake, and it went right through his chest, and it didn't puncture any organs because that dull rebar just pushed, weaved right through everything, just pushed everything out of the way. So that's a good example of how a very sharp blade will slice its way through instead of push its way through, and it helps with penetration as well.
Yeah, and you can even think about it. If you've ever field dress an animal, you see how those organs, and it's pretty graphic, but I mean, you see how those organs move around, and if you stick something dull in there, I mean, you just slide your hand in there and things move out of the way. I've actually never thought about that. Even the fact that a dull broadhead could do that. That's a really great point. When you said that, it kind of blew my mind that, man, yeah, if your broadheads aren't sharp, they're moving organs out of the way. That's like the complete opposite of what we want.
It doesn't seem possible. I mean, my mind sees how fast that arrow is going. I'm thinking there's no way it pushed out of the way, but it does. I mean, I imagine someone could probably set up some high speed stuff, and you could probably watch it push it out of the way, and then we'd all be shocked.
And there's viscoelastic effects too, where tissue with a water content, the speed at which you're cutting can vary on how that tissue reacts, to being sliced. So when we're doing, slow tests where maybe you're pushing through an animal or something, it's not exactly the same thing as what happens when you're shooting at, 250, 300 feet per second. So that's something to keep in mind as well. Being sharp definitely helps. And I think you're seeing a lot more of it now. People are starting to realize the importance, and some broadheads come razor sharp right out of the box, and many do not. Actually, I bought a sharpness tester. I got it sitting over on the ledge here just so that I could kind of learn for myself, number one, what broadheads are coming in at, but then how much sharper I'm able to get them. And in every case, there's never been a broadhead I bought where I wasn't able to get it sharper out of the package. And some of the ones that even have a pretty good reputation, even some of the nice, well-respected fixed blade heads that are one-piece CNC'd, come really dull out of the box, but you can get them significantly sharper. So if you're not sharpening inclined, then sometimes getting a replaceable head or one that has a reputation for being razor sharp can be the way to go. And definitely other guys who might be more willing to learn how to sharpen and want to make that part of their process, you can definitely improve just about every head out there.
Yeah, and I remember growing up, my dad would always have sharp broadheads, but when I moved away and was hunting a lot on my own, it took me a while to understand this is sharp, and then this is hunting sharp. And I think about a lot of people out there that, man, they honestly think, maybe they've even bought it and they're like, I'm not going to leave it, in the box sharp. I'm going to sharpen it, and they get it sharper, but it's still not hunting sharp. And it's kind of a weird thing of how am I supposed to know if I don't know? And I think that's one of those things where if you're unsure, I think when you have a really sharp broadhead, you won't have any concern or question about it. But if you're unsure at all, man, before the season starts, you might have to swallow some pride or something, but reach out to somebody in humility and just be like, hey, can you help me with this? I have a buddy named Zach. He lives, he lives in the same state. He's not as far away as you guys are, but he is great at sharpening things. And he's had people reach out to him before. I remember guys used to reach out, the guys that my dad used to work with, they would reach out to him to sharpen their stuff. Some people have a real knack for it, but understanding what hunting sharp is really important, because I don't think people go out there and go, hey, this blade is 80% there. That's what I'm after, and just when you see a broadhead or any kind of blade that is hunting sharp, you will never forget it. It kind of scares you a little bit. You're like, man, this is got grip to it. It's really strange. But Calvin says, I have similar data. This is when we were talking about stuff earlier. He says, I have similar data from 2 years of tracks and almost exact same results. So that's pretty cool. Hey, speaking of data, let's go into this one right here, you guys. Shane, you were talking earlier about the broadside and quartering away. Dive into that a little bit.
Yeah, so if you look at all of them, and so Ryan put this together recently for me, and you can see the non-recover, the position and the total track average, and then how the average, it was advanced. And that advanced means the dog came in there and at the hunter's point of loss, on average, the top one broadside, we advanced at another 172 yards. Where if you look at that same line for the ones that were recovered, average distance to recovery was another advancement. We advanced at 277, so a little over 100 yards more. But then you look at quartering away and quartering two, and you can see the differences there with quartering away, average advance 141, and quartering two is much lower at 128. And then you look at the average to recovery advance 218 and 251. So and the trend kind of continues on through, depending on the angle of the animal. So it's just some interesting things that he put together for me. And actually, I think we put that together because someone asked a question about it. It'd be nice to know the angles of the positions of the animal. And I called up Ryan and I said, hey, because he has all that data on his computer. He does this stuff for a living. It's kind of his line of work. And so put it this way, my laptop can't handle the program that he uses for this data. And so we can punch in stuff and say, show me all the positions, and then it'll filter through all of it and spit it out for me. So it's good having him on our team.
Yeah, that is. I need to go back and look at that one because I found that one right before we went live, and I need to study that one. That was super cool. Explain the differences, in any one of you guys jumping on this one. explain the difference of what you said earlier, Shane, of like, there's a broadside shot and we all think that that's like the holy grail. But then there's a few of us who have had those quartering away shots, and sometimes you miss, sometimes you really shank it. But when you hit them right on that quartering away, there is nothing better. Explain why that is.
You want to take this one?
Why quartering away is sometimes better than broadside?
Yeah.
I mean, the nice thing about a quartering away is, if you cheat a little bit to one side or the other, you still have the opportunity to have a good hit. Meaning, like, let's say you cheated a little bit too far on the side of the guts. Well, you still got intestines, liver, and probably the offside lung, which is a very fatal shot. If you hit it a little bit too far toward that other shoulder, then you could still have problems with the quartering away. But you got a really big sweet spot there horizontally. Whereas I think with the broadside, if you do hit left or right, you're not getting as many of those compounded organs. Like you might hit just liver, or just the back lobes of the lungs, or just the intestines, and not a combination of those. I would imagine that probably nobody's having issues with penetration on broadside or quartering to. Steep quartering to, which we didn't break it down to that level of detail, but obviously you can have issues with deflections if you get too steep with the quartering away. But all in all, you don't really have any bone to worry about with the quartering away, so you got a pretty big sweet spot there.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it opens it up too with the deer when it's broadside. You got the legs here, and so if you hit right there, you got two sets of shoulders and bones to go through. Whereas as you twist this way, now you've got that nice open gap. You've hit the back of the lung, you've hit the heart or an artery, you've exited from the front of the lung. There's a lot of blood work there, vessels and that carry blood to and from the lungs. And so you get a little bit of everything there. And like Garrett mentioned, if you hit just a little bit back on a broadside shot, you could be liver, or the back of the lungs, which doesn't necessarily kill them very quick. And you might need a tracker in that instance. So it's interesting to see that on paper, how it plays out, different shot angles. And without knowing all the specifics, the data really doesn't prove anything. It kind of hints at things, but without knowing, exact impact, exact angles, exact arrow broadhead setup and whatnot. Those questions, hopefully we can answer at some point in the future with the data coming in from this app. And that, to go back to the I don't want to harp on this too much about the fixed versus mechanical, but if you break down that stat with pass-throughs where the fixed seem to stand out and mechanicals don't, but they stand out a little bit on recovery for non-pass-throughs or even on pass-throughs, if you could break that down to different brands, you may see a brand that is totally a failure. You could say brand X, a mechanical, on non-pass-throughs has 0% recovery or 1% or something very low. Maybe that's bringing that average down where brand, X or B or whatever is far superior. It's getting a lot of pass-throughs. It's almost as good as a fixed blade broadhead. And so the data, although it's interesting to look at, without specifics, it doesn't tell the whole story. And so hopefully the app will kind of fill in those holes.
Yeah, and hopefully it'll help broadhead companies make great products. Continue to. What a valuable piece of data to have. When if you own a broadhead company and you start realizing, man, in the tracker app we're not doing really well. Like we got to do some more R&D. And that's great, man. That's this kind of stuff we need, man. I love this. Scott, thanks for being here, man. Scott says, what will be the cost to the hunter and tracker? I know some trackers publish rates and some do not.
So he's talking about the cost to use the app? Was that?
Yeah, Scott, maybe add something to it. What will be the cost to the hunter and tracker? So maybe just talk about from both of you.
Yeah, I'll talk about the app. On the tracker side on the app, for this year at least, there's no cost at all. We want them to use it. We want them to, we want them to reap the benefit of it. Next year, there may be a subscription, like a 1-year subscription, just to help. We're trying to minimize the cost to the hunter and tracker communicating and connecting with each other, because our ultimate goal is to put them in contact with each other. But at the same time, we can't spend all this money and we'll go broke. We'll go in debt, bankrupt or whatever. So we're trying to recoup a little bit of that money. And so on the hunter side, if we find you a tracker, you can submit a tracking request, create an account, submit a tracking request, totally free. But once a tracker connects with you and agrees to take that track, we'll charge a $10 finder's fee. And we're hoping to eliminate that altogether. So next, when the data comes out, maybe we'll charge a subscription to filter through the data, so that if you're there to use the app to find a tracker, it doesn't cost you anything still. That'll be an optional feature for you. And then hopefully, but to answer your question, is $10 once we secure a tracker for you. Nothing for the hunter before that. You can search for a tracker and there may be 10 available, and you pick the one you want. At that point, you pay the $10. On the tracker side, it's nothing. Now, as far as what the trackers charge, that's on them. You'll find out when you see the trackers that ask you or offer to track for you. You'll see their fee if they put it in there. That's optional for the trackers to disclose their fees. We didn't want to get into the mix of a third party handling money between the hunters and trackers. So that's something for the hunters and trackers to discuss if they don't put the fee down. But a lot of us, put the fee, $50 to track, or like in the case of Minnesota, almost all of us are tip based. We don't charge anything to track, and it says it in our profile. Tips welcome, but no charge to track.
Yeah, that's super cool. So what about a tracker that might be listening to this and saying, hey, man, I really want to get on the tracker app? What do they need to do to get kind of, I guess, verified and confirmed and put on there?
All right, so let's go through that process and then tell what they're going to see on the tracker side of the app, because we haven't touched on that yet. So as a tracker, this is the hardest part for us, is vetting the trackers and make sure we're getting actual trackers on there. And we're working with not only the United Blood Trackers, which is a national organization, UnitedBloodTrackers.org if you want to check them out. We're working with state groups. Like we have the Minnesota Tracking Dogs, and we kind of vet people that are wanting to be a tracker in the state. If they want to join our group, we look at their experience. We encourage them to test and train, or train and then test. And, and we try to, filter out all the bad apples, all the people who are in it for the wrong reason. Because there's scammers. Anytime there's money involved, there's people that come along and say, hey, I'm a tracker. And they're just interested in coming out there with the dog and getting $250 and then going home without really tracking anything. So we're working hand in hand with the UBT and state groups to, if they've already filtered their trackers, they already got them on a tracker list. Like if you go to any Facebook page and type in a state tracking group, they'll have a list of 40, 50 trackers, maybe more. Those guys already been vetted. So if they sign up for an account, I have those lists. I have them from the UBT, and I just click approve, and you're in there. And then once you're in there, before that, let me talk about the ones that don't get in there, the ones that are not part of the group. So if you're not part of a state group where I can vet you easily, you just kind of sit in a holding pattern right now. You'll probably have to be in contact. I'll send an email out usually, or a text to these guys and say, hey, contact this person with this state group, and they'll tell you the process to, they'll have questions for them or whatever. They'll vet them for us. And so we're just trying to keep, it's for the best, for the well-being of everyone. We don't want hunters getting trackers that are not actually trackers. And we want to protect those guys. If they're spending money to have a tracker come out there, we want them to actually have a tracker, not just somebody out there looking for a fast buck. At any rate, so once you're in there, you're approved, you go in there and create your account or your profile, you update it. You select the animals you track, because there's like 7 of them. You can do bear, deer, elk, turkey, wild hogs, coyotes, whatever. And then you also select your service region. So like there's a pin on the map showing where I'm located in Minnesota. And if a lot of trackers already put now, I'll travel within 70 miles of my home. Well, you can slide that slider and make it 70-mile radius around your home. And what will happen is anytime a tracking request comes in, I've selected I track deer and I have my slider set to 70 miles. If a request comes in for a deer within that 70-mile radius, I get a push notification on my phone as a tracker. And I instantly know about that track request. And if one comes in for a bear and I don't track bear, I don't get bothered with it. So it's like it eliminates that guy that calls, hey, you're a tracker. I shot a bear last night. I need somebody. Well, I don't track bear. You don't even have to bother with that. So, and that keeps the hunter, saves them time from wasting the call on you. And so their track request only goes out to the ones that are available and that track the animals that you shot. So anyway, in your profile to continue, you put your certification, like there's UBT1, UBT2, UBT3 tests, and the difficulty of those tests increases. So the tracker with a higher UBT, not necessarily means they got a better dog, but they put in the effort and they put in the training to make their dog better at tracking and can pass those tests. And you don't have to have a certification to join the app. But I mean, if you're a tracker and you've been doing it for 20 years and you've never tested, and you've got hundreds of recoveries, and you're already in one of these state groups, you're automatically going to get in. You won't have that in your profile. Just say untested basically. And then there's a box for you to put your fees, and like I said, that's optional. If you don't want to disclose what you charge, you can leave that blank. Most hunters are going to want to see that. And just so the trackers know, the only people that see your profile is a hunter that you offer to track for. So it's not visible on the app to the general public. They don't see that I'm on there. When I submit a request as a hunter and as a tracker, I offer to take that track, now I can see that tracker's profile and I can read all about it. And I can see the ratings and reviews. So there's a ratings and reviews, kind of like Amazon. As trackers track, the hunter can leave a review only after they completed the track. So a random person can't just go on there and leave a bad review because they hate you, so it prevents all that. We only want reviews coming from hunters that actually had a tracker track for them. And I probably missed something, but that's basically it in a nutshell.
Follow-up proof of life.
Oh, there's a lot of things that trackers are going to like. So I can talk about those features real quick.
Yeah, go for it.
One of the things we really like is our proof of life, proof of death notifications. That's a feature on the app that a lot of trackers love and looking forward to using. And so in the normal process these days, we track I tracked for 30 people, 40 people last year, and say 10 of them I didn't recover the animal. Well, I'm always questioning, did we leave that deer out there in the woods? Was it dead and we just didn't recover it? Or is it still alive? The old way of doing it is hoping the hunter would contact you on their own, or manually calling the hunter back later, and 3 months later or 6 months later, hey, that deer I tracked for you. Did you ever see it on trail camera again? Did you ever see it in this, later in the season? Did you shoot it, or did you find it dead? And sometimes you don't ever get an answer. Maybe they don't answer the phone, they let it go to voicemail, or they don't respond to your text, or they just forget about it. They shoot the deer later and then they don't think about the tracker. The tracker was just hired to come look for a deer. He's not part of the hunt. He's not part of your group of buddies. So it's maybe not top of your list to let them know.
Unless he finds your deer.
Yeah. Then you're the hero.
Yeah.
So I got a buddy over in Wisconsin. I never call the hunters. I just wait for them to. I used to think they would just call me if they found the deer. But apparently that's not the case, because about 18% of the deer I don't recover, the hunter would let me know later that they found the deer, saw it on trail camera or found it, shot it later in the season or something. Very rarely do they find it dead and we missed it. Occasionally that happens. We're not perfect. But I got a buddy that's a tracker in Wisconsin, and he makes it a point to call his hunters multiple times throughout the year. The first time he calls them, if they say no, they haven't seen it, he'll call them, 3 months later. And about 80% of the deer he doesn't recover, he gets confirmation of proof of life, proof of death by manually calling all of them multiple times. And I was like, wow, that's a lot higher odds or percentage than what I'm getting by just waiting. So we built that into the app. So as a tracker, if you track for someone and you don't recover the animal, 30 days after you track, that hunter gets a push notification to their phone, and it says, hey, this guy tracked for you on this date. Have you seen the deer live? Have you found it dead? Did you shoot it later in the season, et cetera, et cetera? And they'll answer yes or no. If they answer no, nothing else happens. It just kind of goes dormant. 240 days later and asked the hunter again. And we built it that long because in a lot of northern parts, it's still snow and ice on the ground. We want the thaw to occur, so sometimes it's easier to find those dead, the skeletal remains of a deer, if that's the case. But at any rate, they get another push notification saying, hey, has this deer been seen alive, found dead, shot later in the season, etc.? Yes or no. If they mark yes either time, and and fill out the box, if I saw it on trail camera or whatever, they mark yes, a push notifications at that point goes to the tracker and says, hey, that track you took on October 16th for so-and-so, they just indicated they seen that deer on trail camera. And so now we get that proof of life automatic. It's an automatic process. And so we don't have to manually call them, So that's a big benefit, I think, for us trackers. And that's going to help the data too, because now we're going to see deer that weren't recovered. There's reasons you don't recover a deer other than they're still alive. There's property lines and there's other issues. But for the ones where the deer was alive, we're going to get answers for a lot of those. And then we're going to see, that's going to complete the data points for those tracks where unrecovered. And you said, the hunter says, I hit it here, I hit a double lung, and we tracked it and we didn't find it. Well, you don't know for sure that's where they hit it. But on these proof of life, now we're going to be able to get that data and say, no, they actually hit it, in the back, above the spine. We see that a lot as trackers where they say a perfect shot. And then 2 weeks later, it shows on trail camera and it's way up in the top of above the shoulder. And so now we can eliminate all that data and say it wasn't a failure, it wasn't a double lung and the deer lived. It was just a non-lethal hit.
Yeah. I love that, man, because it's everything about this is why I love it so much. The more and more I learn about it, is that every little element of it is helping the hunting community as a whole. It's helping the culture of hunting. That's why I wanted you guys on here to talk about it so much, because the more you think about it, it's like, man, the more we can help each other. 240 days later, if I can, as a hunter in South Carolina, if I can contribute to the larger picture of data to help other people, that's just incredible. I love that. Okay, so we have some questions coming in. I'm going to jump to those before they get buried here. Bob, thanks for being here, man. He says, is the tracker able to correct the hunter input regarding shot placement if it was incorrect when a deer is recovered? So basically, can the tracker, once he kind of gets his head around things, can he update the shot placement and kind of start from there?
Yes. So when a tracker takes a track and goes out there, and once he's done with the track, he marks it as complete, and he'll have it's about 3 to 4 questions. It depends on how you answer them. And they're all conditional. So the first question is, did you recover the animal? Yes or no? And if you mark it yes, it says, how far did you advance the track? And then where was the animal hit? The entry and exit wounds. And I can't remember the fourth one, but it's all conditional based on if you didn't recover, it would be a different question. But it ends up being about 4 questions total. And the hit location on the animal is definitely one of them. And what that data does is once it's completed and there's an animal recovered, it does overwrite or supersede the data the hunter put in there. We don't care that the hunter put that he hit it here if we know exactly where it hit. That's irrelevant now. Now we know it hit here, and that will, give more actual or accurate data as far as if you're looking at, for instance, broadhead types. Okay, why didn't it pass through? Okay, he hit it right here in the femur, or some big large bone in the body. So now we have those answers.
Yeah, that's super cool. Andy says, can a tracker input data from tracks that did not come through the app, or should they encourage people to get the app afterwards and input that data?
So yeah, we talked about that earlier, I think. I don't know if it was on air or before we started, but I think it was on the air. We plan to update the app where hunters can manually and trackers manually add data for like trackers. They can. So on the tracker side right now, you can't see, you can't filter through your tracking data as you take tracks. That's a feature we're building in now where you'll be able to document all your tracks. You'll filter through your personal tracking data. So not only will you have the data that everyone can, the national data where you can filter through, the tracker will have their personal data tracking stats they can filter through. And we plan to incorporate where you can manually, as a tracker, maybe you took a call, not from the app, a direct call, and you went and tracked it. Now you could input that manually And again, that would be separated from app collected data, but it would be, included together, but also separated. If you know what I'm trying to say.
Yeah. Yeah. So, Andy, if you're just jumping in, yeah, I think we talked about that right at the beginning. Shane said something that's going to be like, what'd you say, submitted and collected.
Yeah.
So that's really helpful. And I like how it's split up too. Like it's not all just jumbled together.
And
Because there's total.
that's features that are coming. That's features coming. It's not currently available, but
Okay.
we're just working on the backside. We just got to finish up iOS, and those other features are being built. They're right in line to be built. And so there's the app. Once it's completely out on iOS and Android, it's not done. We're still building,
Yeah.
and you'll get updates as things go along.
Cool. Yeah. And so that's a good point to make, is that we're recording all of this and we're going to make this free because I think it's really important for as many hunters to know about this as possible. So if you're jumping in kind of late, if you missed something in the beginning, you can go back and watch it once we post it here. We got one more question here, and then we'll take a break, and then we'll come wrap things up. Scott says, if a tracker accepts a track and the animal is not recovered, does the hunter have the opportunity to submit a new request with notation that a tracker has already been out on that particular track? Some hunters will call for another tracker if the animal was not recovered.
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, I know they can submit another tracking request.
And you'd be able to put notes in there.
Yeah, they have. There's boxes like reason for calling the tracker. I mean, they could fill it in there. I mean, we haven't built it in there to explain to them, hey, if you've already got a tracker out there already once before, let the tracker know. But they would be able to fill that out and submit a tracking request, another tracking request. Now, as far as there was a question that came up that I had, between our team. If someone submits a tracking request and a tracker accepts their offer or offers to take their track, they pay that $10, and suppose that tracker cancels on them for whatever reason. Maybe they get in a car accident, or something bad happens where they can't make it. There's two options. The tracker can transfer that track to another tracker. Like I could call up my buddy and say, hey, David, I'm not going to be able to make it to this track. Can you cover it for me? I've already talked to the hunter, and the hunter's okay with it. And what you do as a tracker is you cancel that track, and you got to let the hunter know, and the hunter's aware of this. My buddy David will offer to take that track, and now the hunter will accept his offer. So it won't cost the hunter any more money to change trackers. If somebody cancels on them, maybe they just cancel them because they can't make it, or they intend to transfer it to another tracker for whatever reason. You don't have to submit another tracking request and pay another $10. Once that tracking request is paid for, after you find the initial tracker, you can keep looking for other trackers. Now, if that track is marked as complete by the first tracker and you want to search for another tracker, now it's going to, you can search again for free, but if you find another tracker that's willing to take it, you're going to have to pay another $10. That's just the way that it's hard to build every scenario into an app when you're trying to, cover our costs but minimize the cost to the user. But like I said, if you already paid once and the tracker cancels on you, you won't be punished. But if the track has been completed and we've done our part, then you will be charged again.
Yeah. Scott says, I ask more for the tracker side to know that there's already been a tracker out. So it sounds like what you said there. He posted that as you were still talking, but it kind of sounds like, to me at least, that like both parties would be able to get an updated log of what's going on.
I think what he's saying is something that I guess I haven't quite thought about, and is something that should be thought about. If there's a way to indicate that this hunter submitted one, maybe the hunter doesn't want to tell the tracker that and keep it secret. And so, maybe I'll discuss it. Now, we work with a group of trackers as our test group, and we're getting input from everyone. We're not just doing our ideas. But that would be definitely something beneficial to the tracker to know that he's going in behind another tracking dog, which makes our job difficult, because if another tracking dog has already been in there, number one, it's probably a good tracker and the deer's probably not dead. The hunter just doesn't want to accept reality. And number two, now that you've had a dog and another tracker in there and the hunter that now they've disturbed the scent trail even more. So, if there's a way to possibly incorporate that into the app where it throws a kind of heads up to us as trackers, say, hey, this tracker's already been in there one time for this track. Maybe it's beneficial, something we add to it. Right now, that's voluntary for the hunter to do. If they want to put it in the notes when they submit another request, say, hey, I already had one tracker out here, but he couldn't find it. That's the way it's going to have to happen initially, but it's definitely something to think about.
Yeah, that is really cool. Scott says, Shane is spot on with my question. Trackers going behind another dog without knowing. That's perfect. So I'm glad we got some clarity on that. Natalie, thanks for being here, Natalie. She says, can the tracker also leave feedback and reviews on the hunter?
Did we include that? You asked me a question. I guess I don't know the answer. I don't think
we definitely discussed either that, or like if you had a problem hunter that was like well known, because I know like sometimes in the groups guys would be sort of blacklisted if they.
Yeah, we discussed the option of adding the option of a do not track list or feature, like that you could mark a hunter as like someone you don't want to track for ever again because they did something illegally. Like they called you out there to track a deer that they were trespassing and shot, and they just, they told you it was their land. We've had that happen in real life. And so that hunter gets blacklisted. He goes on my do not track list, and my buddies, my friends and other trackers, I let them know about that person, and they usually add it to their do not track list. And so I will look at that. I will get an answer for you. Maybe after the show, I can probably go back, right, Mike? And
yep, for sure. Yep.
Mm-hmm. I got to go look at the app. I know we discussed having a ratings review for the hunter as well. It definitely needs to be something in there so that trackers can, keep an eye out for the bad apples. There's bad apples on both sides potentially, and we're trying to minimize that. So that's a good question. I will look into that and give you an answer somehow, some way.
Yeah, that is a really great question. She says, I asked for the rare case of inappropriate behavior or for safety and law violations. That's a super mature question. Really, really great question. So thanks for asking that, Natalie. You and Callie, Shane, over the last 7 years, like you've had to, like what you knew as a hunter and your experience, like so many of us look up to you for your wisdom and your experience, and just everything you have to offer. But I got to think that after 7 years of tracking that there's something that or several things that you've learned and that you do differently as a hunter, like maybe it's shot placement or, maybe some kind of prep, like different broadheads or things like that. So talk about that a little bit.
Number one thing that I've learned is a lot of deer that I shot when I was younger that still haunted me up until I started tracking don't haunt me anymore. There's one deer in particular I know that was a non-lethal hit. At the time, I was young. I was 15, 16, somewhere in that range, 17, a young bow hunter. And I had my uncle out there helping me look for this buck. And I didn't find blood for maybe 100 yards where he crossed the creek. And I felt so bad about not being able to find this deer. It was a limited penetration. It was a high shoulder shot right above the spine. At the time, I used to think if I drew blood on a deer, it was a dead deer. At some point he was going to die. But, tracking for all these years has taught me that deer are very resilient, even on great shots. I've tracked deer that were double lung and the heart was lacerated and they go 1,500 yards, or double lung and liver shot and they go over a mile and they're still warm and limber when you find them 24 hours later. And so there's probably hunters out there that have beaten themselves up over shots they thought were lethal, or there were actually shots that were lethal and they just couldn't find the deer. It's amazing some of the things these deer survive. And so even when you put a great shot on, a lethal great shot, what we think is a great shot, you did everything right. And it's out of your control at that point, especially during the rut when these bucks are rut crazed and full of adrenaline and hormones and everything else. They are a different critter altogether. And that's another thing in the data hopefully we're going to see is, and I already see it myself personally, deer in general that I track in September, bucks, does, whatever, the bucks go much farther with similar shots in November during the rut, or they don't die at all. It's amazing. They can survive shots, it seems like, in November that would kill them easily in September. I don't know if I don't know how it's possible, but that just seems to be what the data is showing us, and our tracking experience is showing us.
That is wild, man. Garrett, what about you? I mean, like helping develop this app and getting this thing off the ground. What are some things that, like, now you're a better hunter, you're a more knowledgeable hunter because of?
I mean, it definitely teaches you to keep an open mind, because you assume, based off of all your personal experiences or the experiences that you've shared with other people, of how things generally work. But then you're exposed to a lot of instances, like Shane just pointed out, that kind of take your preconceived notions and flip them around. So for me, it's caused me to take a lot more cautious and thorough look about the entire situation. A lot of cases you might see the deer go down and it's a great shot and it ends there, right? But in those cases where you didn't see the deer go down and maybe you track 60 yards, and it's like, oh, maybe this wasn't exactly what I thought, then you're able to take a lot more holistic view, and I'm able to think about all the possible things that could happen, and really take a better decision on, should I continue this track on my own or not.
Yeah. So Shane, real quick, last question before my last question. I'm just curious. I could talk for another hour about this stuff. I love it. Let's talk about Cali, and let's talk about like guys that want to get involved with tracking. Like, man, I really like what Shane does. I love watching that YouTube channel. I want to get a dog. Give them some advice on how to go about becoming successful with this and just having fun with it.
There's a lot of work, and there's going to be a lot of questions. I don't know how to answer it all in a short amount of time. Number one is pick the dog that's appropriate for you. I've chose Callie because of her long legs, and we have a lot of marshes and wetlands up here. Sometimes I regret that, because she is such a strong dog and she likes to pull really hard, and that's been something to deal with the early years. And she's not so aggressive in her pulling now that she's gotten a little older and more experienced, and maybe that just comes with her experience. But she's also a house dog. I live in Minnesota. I wouldn't force her to sleep outside when it's -30. So I've dealt with her howling as people walk by the house in the evening, down the sidewalk or whatever. So number one is find a dog that's suitable for you, that's going to be a good companion, good house pet as well. Something that's family friendly. Or if you like some trackers, I got a buddy that his dog's a yard dog and don't necessarily need to be a family pet. So pick it, take that into consideration, in other words. And then the other thing is, read a lot. There's some books on the United Blood Trackers website. There's plenty of YouTube videos on tracking and training. Put the effort in to give that base training and get them started off right. There's a lot of misinformation out there, I feel, as well. Luckily, I think I stumbled on the right course of training. When I was searching early on, I did a lot of reading and comparing, and it matched kind of my thought process, like using liver and blood versus hooves. And, I trained my dog I tested her kind of initially with liver and blood to see if she wanted to track it. And then I quickly shifted over to just hooves from wounded deer that had been recovered, or just hooves. And then I think that's made her a better tracker overall, because you're not going to have a lot of blood and a lot of scent on some of these tracks, or you wouldn't be called out there if there's a lot of blood. So there's difficult tracks that's going to make the dog better on. If you're out there training your dog just to follow a piece of deer hide that you drag around, that's so easy for them that when you get on those difficult tracks, you're going to struggle. But spend a lot of time and effort researching it first, and make sure once you pick the dog that's right for you, put a good base training scenario, or come up with a good training scenario for this dog, so that they succeed when things get tough.
Yeah, and then when you have a few years of experience, send Shane some sweet treats, some cookies, cake, and you'll get put on the tracker app. That's what I took away from this.
Yeah, I don't need any more sweets.
Okay, so real quick, we'll wrap things up here. Let everybody know real quick how to get it. I know the iOS is coming. I'm still waiting on it, but the Android stuff's ready to rock. Tell people how to download it, how to reach out to you guys if they have any more questions or anything like that.
Yeah, I mean, the easiest way to do it is just to search it on the Google Play Store or the Apple Store once it's ready. It's spelled TRAKR, tracker. And then the website, if you want to look at that, is gettracker.com. There's social media pages set up for it as well. But the easiest way to find it is just look right immediately on the App Store, and you should be able to find it, download it, and sign up.
Yeah, and if you go to the website, gettracker.com, not only are there links to download it from Google Play, and then the link to the App Store for iOS will be activated soon. You can see a lot of the features we talked about. There's imagery and just short explanations of each one. We still have to add a lot to the website. There's a lot of work that's been behind the scenes building the app, and we're trying to build a website at the same time and do all this other stuff. It's a lot. It's very time consuming, and all of us have full-time jobs, so it's been a lot of work. But anyway, if you want to go get some more information, go to gettracker.com. The links to download it from the App Store or the Google Play Store and stuff are there, and our social media links are there too. So Get Tracker on Facebook, Get Tracker on TikTok, and on YouTube.
Yeah. Jamie Adams says, I'd like to see it in the state regulations booklet. That's a good idea, man. That's really
That
good.
would be nice. The DNRs would add it. That'd be great.
Yeah, that would be cool. Well, guys, I can't thank you enough. I'm super excited about this thing. It's doing, like what I said in the beginning, this is so much more than just another app for hunting or, gear, gadget, whatever you want to call it. Like this is advancing the culture of hunting, and we're able to document hunting culture here. And that's just so cool because I support you guys. HuntBetter supports you guys in this 100%. And so I'm excited for the iOS to hit because I know it's going to be on my phone. It's just kind of comforting too to know I can go in the woods and like I have a team around me like that if I need them. I think that's very, very encouraging. But thank you guys for doing this. This is super cool.
Yeah, thanks, Mike, for having us on.
Yeah, man. Hey, everybody, thanks for being here. Whether you're subscribed or whether you're just tuning in for the free episode, we're super thankful you're here. Make sure to check everything that we have on the site, especially going into this season. If you're feeling behind the 8 ball, we got some good stuff to make you catch up. So thanks for being here. Remember, hunt harder, hunt smarter. We'll see you.